I'm Derek Eyring. I've been in the real estate business for over 3 decades. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm always paying attention to real estate trends, industry innovators, and business influencers.
I'm Alan Smith. For over 25 years, I've helped buyers and sellers with their real estate needs. Join us on this podcast. Let's talk about strategies to help you play this real estate game to win.
Join us as we search out the latest trends, hot topics, red flags, and deal breakers in every episode of Market Movers. All right, Al, I mean, you can use this if you want to your own benefit.
Okay, right.
I realized this morning that my body wash, I bought it at Home Depot.
You did.
Yeah.
And what's the result?
It's real. I don't know. You tell me. Who buys body wash at Home Depot?
Well, apparently you do. You
Yeah.
do. So, yeah, this being our very first podcast, you can already tell this will be the one we look back on a few years from now and just cringe.
Yeah, right? For sure. I mean, I think we're going to look back on all of them.
All of them.
And probably cringe, but hopefully we'll have a couple of little nuggets here and there. That's our goal.
Exactly.
You know, we spend most of our week preparing to talk to our brokers and our clients, because we do both. And we get to talk about real estate all week long with lots of different brokers, lots of different clients. And we just thought, you know, why don't we just encapsulate our whole month's worth of topics and issues and red flags, deal breakers, things that are going on in the market, and have that as a sort of a piece that we can put out there and take it or leave it, like it or not like it. It's there for everyone to check out.
Yeah, you know, our industry is real fond of 5-second sound bites. And the reality is we have 3 meetings a week. We meet with all our offices, plus our own individual clients. We get the chance to talk to our agents about what they're experiencing with their clients. And what we find is so many people, it's not about national news headlines. It's what's going on in their world and what really matters to them. And so, you know, it's a great idea, I think, and a great chance for us to sit down and just really talk about, okay, maybe the headline says this, but what's the reality behind the headline? And what does that really mean if someone's trying to buy or sell real estate today?
Yeah, and you know, and from the client's perspective too, from our buyers and sellers out there, it's always good to look at it from all sides. And we're also lucky enough to be exposed to some great business people out there. Not all of them are in the real estate business. So as time goes on, we want to have some guests on that can talk to us about what they're doing out there and what they're doing to make things happen. So.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we have some great real estate brokers in our offices that are very successful. And I think everybody that's in this business, or if you're thinking of getting into the real estate world, it's a great opportunity to pick up some tips from people that are doing this successfully, so that you can learn at an exaggerated pace, and maybe you don't have to stub your toes so many times like I did when I first got into business.
You stubbed your toe?
I did a time or two.
Yeah.
My biggest problem was I thought I knew everything.
Oh, I know.
I did not.
Yeah. So before we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on. We're in the Pacific Northwest, so we're going to talk about what's happening in our market and then kind of move on to a couple other things that are on our mind lately. But we've had some big, significant changes in our industry lately. Mm-hmm. And the big one that people are hearing about is the NAR settlement.
Right.
It's on the news every day. And the headlines, like most headlines now, are fairly bombastic. You know, the real estate industry is changing forever, et cetera, et cetera. Al, in simple terms, how did we get here and what's going on?
So the biggest takeaway is, as we're talking about this here today, nothing has been finalized. So when you see somebody come on the news, or when you see somebody come on their YouTube channel with their predictions of exactly how this real estate landscape is going to play out, number one, take that with a grain of salt, because nobody knows how this is ultimately going to play out. What we do know is that what the proposals are have been largely accepted, and we seem to be moving towards a settlement, and most people seem to kind of think they know what the terms of that will be. But the big moves behind the scenes were really a couple of things. There was a growing thought on the part of buyers back in the day that, hey, I really don't know how my real estate broker is being paid. I don't know who pays them. I don't know, what they're paying as the transaction begins. And so maybe some buyers raised their hand at one point and said, hey, how do I know that my real estate agent isn't just showing me the houses that pay them the most? How do I know that, right? And on the other side of that coin, sellers raised their hand and said, if I'm offering compensation to the agent that's representing the buyer, why am I offering a commission to somebody who's negotiating against me, right? And so those were the two big issues, and some lawsuits came about. Some attorneys and some of their law firms saw some low-hanging fruit and said, "Hey, there's money on them there hills, so let's go get it." So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And so given that landscape, now we move forward and we figure out, okay, how do we navigate the new terrain? And is it really all that different? And is it really all that new? It really depends on what your perspective is and how people have been conducting their business in the past.
Yeah. So, on a little side note here, the Realtors Association and realtors in general operate under state and federal law. So we've been working under that law for our entire career. So when the Department of Licensing tells us what to do, we do it. So that's how we've been operating. There's kind of no way around that.
Right. Yeah, and so the three big takeaways, the three big proposals have been that sellers we're gonna decouple the offer of compensation from the seller to the buyer's broker. So the seller can choose to offer compensation if they want to, but they're not obligated to. So guess what? Newsflash. It's always been that way.
It's always been that way.
The seller has always had the opportunity to offer zero compensation or however much compensation they want to offer. It's just that most sellers will take a look at the marketplace and they'll say, well, gosh, if my three neighbors that are on the marketplace are offering X compensation to any broker that brings a buyer, if I don't, what does that do to my showings, right? And so a lot of savvy sellers understand that it's going to limit your showings because it's going to confine your buyer pool, right? So, but that's always been the case. It's just now more pronounced and more talked about. So that's been that. The second issue has been that in the past, even though brokers have always had a signed agreement with the seller to list their property and to put their property on the market, not every agent has had a signed agreement with their buyers.
In fact, very few, really.
Very few.
Buyer agency agreements were kind of relegated to a very small percentage in the past.
Yeah, and so one of the things that came around with this settlement proposal is that we will now have agreements in place with every buyer so that it gives the agent an opportunity to sit down with the buyer and say, this is how I work, this is how I expect to be compensated. And these are the areas that I serve, and these are kind of the rules by which I think we can get along with. And so in that regard, it's been very good. I think what has happened in some areas of the country, though, they have not had to deal with this, whereas here in the Pacific Northwest, in our particular location, we made those changes part of our state law on January 1st of this year, at time we're recording this, over 5 months ago.
As a matter of fact, the decoupling portion was done a couple of years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, a long time ago.
So we have two out of the three
Yeah.
things here going on already.
So we've had a chance to kind of get used to it and figure out, okay, what do these conversations look like when we're sitting down talking with a buyer, talking with a seller. But some other places in the country, you can tell they're a lot more reactive right now because this is kind of a new thing to them. So I think we've got a strong advantage in our marketplace. The third thing is that there's a proposal to remove all offers of compensation from the multiple listing services. We don't really know quite yet how that's going to pan out. So the idea is that there won't be, when you look at a listing, there won't be any offer of compensation anywhere. It's going to be up to the individual brokers to figure out if there is or is there not. Right now, our multiple listing service has taken the opposite approach. We are transparent in everything, and it's on all the websites. It's right on the front page of the purchase and sale agreement what the buyer broker is getting paid during this transaction. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out. But at the end of the day, it's less about how the agents are being paid than how we're serving the needs of our buyers and our sellers. What's in the best interest of the seller to get their home looked at by buyers? What's in the best interest of the buyer to get a house that they want to live in?
So let's kind of put this into a live example. So in the past, when I engage with a seller to sell their property, we sit down and then we agree on a positioning of the property with price and how it's going to get marketed, right?
Right.
And then we also agree on a fee or compensation. In the past, we also agree on what they want to compensate the selling broker, the broker that represents the buyer.
Correct.
So now, how is this changing then?
So in a lot of ways, it really hasn't. It now becomes a conversation because the headlines are suggesting that, hey, you don't have to offer any more commissions, and you don't have to do this, and the realtors are going to go by the wayside, and it's a whole brand new day, which is just a national media headline.
And again, it's been true that you don't have to offer
Absolutely.
any compensation.
They've never had to compensate. It's just that most sellers, if they know what they're doing and they really want to get their home sold, think about this. A buyer these days has to save up a small fortune for their down payment. They have to save up a small fortune for their closing costs.
Which a lot of people forget about or don't know about.
Forget about, yeah, which can be almost as much as their down payment to begin
for
with,
sure.
depending on the loan program,
Yeah.
right? Well, couple that with high interest rates.
What would those closing costs involve usually?
Sometimes, well, you're doing your prepays for your taxes, your insurance, your loan origination fees. There's all kinds of fees involved in a loan for a home, but they can sometimes be up to 3%, even more, depending on the lender and the loan package. So you've got a buyer that's had to save up for 3.5% to 5% or so for their down payment, and they've had to save up for their closing cost. Well, if a seller today doesn't want to offer compensation, okay, great. So you're looking for a buyer who also has the financial ability to pay their broker whatever their broker fee is. And so you're looking at a buyer pool that's going to be significantly shrunk down if you're only looking for a buyer that can do all three. And my thought here, my guess, my hunch is that if a buyer can do all three of those, they're pretty financially well set. They're probably going to come in with a pretty sharp pencil when it comes to the seller's price to begin with. And they're probably going to say, hey, if I have to do all this, then I can only offer you this. And so most sellers sit back and they say, okay, all the profit that I'm making on the sale of this house has been market driven. It's not because I used heavy duty nails on my back deck. It's because the market has driven these prices up. And so let's take some of that market equity and let's compensate the buyer broker so that I can expand my buyer pool, and that increases my chances of getting more offers. It's kind of like the deadliest catch approach to real estate. When you're pulling up the crab net, you don't want the fewest amount of crab possible because it's easier to pull. You want the most crab in the pot, so then you can sort out the keepers. And so that's kind of the way the real estate world has been always worked. It's just that now it's more of a conversation, and sometimes it's a confusing conversation because the national media headlines like to grab the juiciest, tastiest headline and throw it out there as if it's fact. And again, none of this has been settled and established anyway.
Right. And on the buyer side, so there are a few changes, and I think it's good for buyers to know that when you engage with a real estate broker, you finally find most buyers find their real estate broker, quite frankly, by going to open houses. You look online yourself and you go to an open house and you find somebody that you think, hey, I can do business with this person, right? Generally speaking, statistically.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, yeah.
So when you get to that point, if you're working with a broker who is in compliance with the current state law, then the buyer representation agreement has to come roll out before they can show you a house.
Yeah, so one of the new kind of wrinkles to this is that now everybody in our area is required to have a buyer representation agreement in place. Now, the open houses are one exception. If you're hosting an open house, if you're a real estate broker, you're hosting an open house, there's no requirement to have a buyer sign an agreement.
They're going to hit you at the door.
Right here, no, you got to sign this before you can see the kitchen.
Yeah.
Great. It's got a great toaster. You're going to love it. You don't have to do that. Yeah,
Right.
because in an open house environment, I think smarter wisdom has said, okay, you haven't really agreed to work together yet. You have the doors open here. You're like a tour guide. Hey, come on in, check it out. Tell me what you think, right? But if it goes beyond that, if somebody says, hey, what about the little yellow house down the end of the street? Can I go take a look at that with you? That's where you're starting to establish a working relationship, and that's where the buyer representation agreement takes place. If you're starting off with a buyer and you agree to go show 4 houses this weekend, a buyer representation agreement has to be in place before you do that. And that's the same with everybody. So a cautionary tale I would give to any buyer out there right now is if you are working with someone who has not asked you to do that, then you are working with someone, I'm going to go out on a limb here a little bit, you're either working with someone who is unaware of state law changes for 5 months, or you're working with someone who just doesn't care about the rules and regulations and is kind of a lone wolf out there. In which case, I would caution you to ask yourself, well, how much are they willing to protect me in the transaction if they're just playing loosey-goosey with legalities, right? So,
Right.
So just be prepared. If you're a buyer, at some point, an agent's going to have to sit in front of you, and I'm using the words agent and broker interchangeably. We're all brokers, but I know most of the public thinks of us as agents. At some point, someone's going to sit down with you with a piece of paper and say, here's how I expect to be paid. Here's the areas that I work. If a seller is offering compensation, then we need to talk about how that aligns with what I expect to be paid and what we're going to do if it's less or more. So all those conversations are going to take place. And the good news is they take place up front now.
Right.
So once you get that out of the way and everybody's comfortable, it's like, great, let's go shopping. Let's go find the house, right? So it's still the way it's kind of always been, with the exception that in the past, most people just didn't use written agreements and they just dealt with things as they came up.
Yeah. So the mechanics of the new, proposed settlement would be that the seller will offer some kind of concession to the buyer, not the selling broker.
Right.
And the buyer can choose whether to use that concession to pay the fee or not. Correct?
Correct.
I mean, in simple terms.
In simple terms, the buyer is responsible for the payment of compensation to the broker. Their broker, they can accept what the seller is offering. If the seller's not offering anything, then they can pay the broker directly at closing, or there can be negotiations back and forth to figure it out. Because I don't think anybody expects a real estate broker to take weeks or months helping a buyer buy a home and do that for free. I don't think anybody's really expecting that. And so the details of the paperwork kind of spell that out in advance.
Yeah, so buyers can expect to see the buyer representation agreement like we've been talking about, and it'll have a couple of components. It'll say, is my broker exclusive or non-exclusive?
Right.
And what's that mean?
Well, are we dating or are we married? In other words,
Yeah.
if you're non-exclusive,
This sounds exciting.
I know, right? Yes, that's why I got into real estate. No, it's a non-exclusive agreement is, hey, you know what? If you work with me, if I help you buy a house, great. I get paid at the end of the day. If you don't want to work with me, that's great. If you go and want to work with Derek, I'm cool with that too. So that's a non-exclusive agreement.
And in general, if I may add, that's mostly how we always work anyway.
That's how it's kind of always been. If
Yeah.
you never used an agreement in the first place,
Yeah.
the buyer could say, yeah, but I don't like Al
I'm
that
not
much.
feeling it with you,
Yeah.
Al. I don't know.
Let's go with this Derek guy. He seems a lot better. So
yeah.
So that's kind of the way it's always been. If it's an exclusive relationship, it means that both the broker and the client are agreeing to work with each other exclusively in the pursuit of buying this home, and that the buyer is not going to go work with another broker.
Now we review a lot of files for all our brokers every week. And are you seeing more exclusives or non-exclusives?
I'm kind of seeing 50-50. I think
Okay.
a lot of people have determined that, look, if you don't want to work with me exclusively, then that's an issue, because I don't want to do a bunch of work and then have you decide to go look at a different house one day and all my work is for nothing. At the
Makes
same,
sense.
yeah, I can see that point.
right.
Other people say, hey, let's just go see what happens. Let's do non-exclusive, and if we don't like working with each other, let's call it off. and so like it's kind of always been. So I see both sides of the coin. I see probably 50-50 right now in terms of our paperwork. That's one advantage we have, as we audit all the paperwork that comes through all three offices. So every single thing that one of our brokers is involved in, we have eyeballs on. And so I think we get more of a 30,000-foot view of what the average transaction looks like than maybe what somebody does that only is looking at their own transactions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a little more perspective there, I think.
Yeah. So, in real life terms, in real life, I just sold my house, and I would not offer compensation. It just limits the market so much, or it creates a scenario where you have this whole negotiation process for something that I was already planning. I want to open up my property to as many possibilities as possible.
Right.
And I think by offering zero compensation, saying, "Hey, let's see how good you are, or come to me and try to negotiate your fee, and I'm going to see what I can do here."
Yeah.
I think it just makes it more difficult, right?
Well, if you only have one buyer, tell me how that bidding war is going to work out.
Right. Right.
I mean, you're going to get pretty much what they're offering if you accept it, right? But if you expand the net, the dead least catch analogy again, if you expand that net a little bit, the more buyers that look at the property, the more potential offers you receive, and the more potential offers you receive, the better your outcome. And so, some sellers will focus strictly on the costs, but they don't focus on what having a great broker and what having more offers to choose from could ultimately mean. Because we are still seeing multiple offer situations and properties selling for over asking. So
Yeah, absolutely.
so that's still a factor in this market.
Okay, so with all that said, I think there's more to be seen with that. We, like you said, it's not settled yet, and it might change.
It's already changed last month. They keep moving the end target date a little bit. So you know what? It's like surfing right now. You just get on the wave and you ride, and you know what you're doing, and you follow the rules. And when you're done with the ride, you turn around and say, "Okay, here's another wave. Let's go catch the next wave." And who knows? The third wave may be the best one.
Right.
So let's control what you can control. And help your clients to the best of your abilities if you're a real estate broker listening to this. And just don't let the process get in the way of the outcome, which is ultimately helping people get into the home of their dreams, or helping a seller get their property sold so they can get to the next chapter of their life. And too often we focus on the processes and not on the outcomes.
We've seen a lot of changes over the years in our industry, and we've been doing this for a while. Right. When I started, all the data was controlled by the brokers in the form of a book that was delivered to the lobby. You were there for the end of that, right?
And we got updates once a week. A little paper supplement. Here's your update to the real estate market. Like every Monday morning, we get our delivery, and when the system went to computerized,
to DOS,
to a DOS-based computer system, people were in revolts. How am I going to conduct my business if I have to have a computer now? And then, this is back in the day where everybody had a pager and they were advanced. And if you walked in with a cell phone, it was like, holy cow, look at this rock star.
Yeah, you were really doing stuff.
The thing that's funny about that is every time there's a change like that in the industry. The first time we went to digital signatures on things, people fought that. The first time we went to a digital system for setting showing appointments, people fought that. And you look back on it now and you think like, well, why do we waste so much energy fighting this thing when we look back on it now as being so silly? Can you imagine getting a weekly update on what the real estate market was doing? Weekly, not minute by minute. Weekly, here's your paper supplement. Can you imagine buyers picking out their homes with a real estate book? Looking at properties that are already sold. So we've come so far, but every single step it seems like that we've made, we've done it kicking and screaming. And then we look back in time and we laugh and it's like, gosh, how'd you like to fax an offer over? or you go see a crazy realtor Bob over in Gig Harbor, and you got to drive 2 hours to hand deliver the offer to his office. So
Yeah.
you know, the good old days are the good old days.
Yeah.
And it's probably for a reason. So
Yeah, it is. And yeah, I remember my first broker, Terry Haberbish, rest in peace. He was a great guy. And I just remember we got our first fax machine. He was so excited. And when the rates went down under 10%, equally as excited.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was back in the day where, yeah, if you wanted to buy a house, you had to kind of get with your realtor because you didn't know it was for sale.
You didn't know what was for sale.
And
Right.
then your realtor would take you to the house in their car. You'd see the house, and then if you wanted to write an offer, you'd write an offer, and your broker would then present it in person with the other broker sitting there and the sellers. And
Right.
so you really had to rely on your broker being a good negotiator.
Yeah, and a lot of our industry has changed over the years towards making things efficient and expediting the time that it takes to accomplish things. And most of that's for the good. And so one of the challenges, if you're thinking of getting in this business as a real estate broker, you kind of need the mindset of just accepting technology and learning it to the best of your abilities, but not letting it get in the way of just helping people, right? But you know, it's such a mobile industry nowadays. You should be able to conduct business wherever you are. And one of the things we like to do is just kind of help people learn how to do that. But it's changed so much in just the years that we've been doing it.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to what's happening in our marketplace. So we're in the Pacific Northwest. It's this podcast will roll out on June 2024. And right now, here is kind of the state of the market from our vantage point. And it could be different in different parts of the Northwest, but
Right.
in general, we cover 3 or 4 different counties here, the greater King County, Pierce, and working on down over in the
So most of the Puget Sound, all of the Puget Sound area, but a lot of Western Washington
is in our coverage zone.
is in our area.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So for sellers right now, the average sales price, take a guess.
Oh, I don't know, five
A
something.
little higher, $615,000 is the average sales price. I feel like entry point for just kind of a basic fixer house. If you come down to Pierce County, you're going to get a little bit better, lower entry point, but you got to be in the 4s.
Yeah.
You know?
There's the old saying that all real estate is local, and that's the best example that we could use for that. You know, there's places in the country right now that would be shocked at the prices being that high. And I guarantee you there are people in the Bay Area right now that are looking at those prices and saying, you know, I'll take 3.
Yeah, exactly.
So it just kind of depends on where you're coming from. But yeah, it's a slow little trickle, and it just keeps. Right now, we don't have a whole lot of indication that prices are relaxing at all. So
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason is because of the amount of homes on the market. Right now, guess how many homes we have on the market in the Pacific Northwest?
well, it's in the double-digit thousands. For
yeah,
sure.
so currently we have 16,000. That's as of today in the Northwest MLS, 16,061 active listings.
Actively, that's all price categories.
All price
Okay.
categories, right?
Right.
Guess what the peak inventory in the last 10 years was?
So in the last 10 years, what is the highest snapshot of inventory been? Way higher than that.
Yeah.
I would say 2-3 times higher, probably.
So it was 47,268 active listings in August 2014.
Wow.
47,000. We have 16,000 now.
So just a little less than 10 years ago, there were 47,000 active listings.
Right.
And today there's 16.
So that's
So,
telling you something right there, right? That's why the prices are going up.
right. So that's a supply and demand issue right there.
is.
The demand is no less than it's ever been for housing, but the availability of what buyers can choose from is roughly what is that, like a third?
Yeah,
Roughly, right?
yeah. And you know, there we can guess at all the causes of this. I think some of it is a hangover, honestly, from the recession years and years ago when everything stopped and made this look like nothing. Because right now we're having a little bit of an issue with interest rates. But everything stopped, and lenders stopped loaning money to developers as well, and they stopped even getting permits. So we had a period of years there where nothing happened. And I think we're still in that hangover.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times that causes some homeowners to just be cautious. Let's take care of our investment, and if we don't need to move, let's not move. We don't need to, especially if they purchased a home in the last 4 years, especially during the COVID relief
Yeah, and that's
time.
the second layer, right?
Yeah, and then they're sitting on 3% money basically.
Yeah.
They're not eager to jump into the market at what the current rates are because there's no financial investment. So you and I were talking about this the other day. We've always seen a small percentage of the marketplace will only move when it makes financial sense. And so they're selling yesterday's home and making some money today, and then they're moving to the next big home, and eventually they'll be in the trophy house, and they will have escalated their way one step at a time to reach that point. And from a financial standpoint, that's part of their strategy, right?
Right.
That small percentage of the American consumer is kind of sitting on the sidelines right now because it just doesn't make sense given the current
Yeah, they have a
interest
2.5% or 3%
Right.
mortgage rate, and they just, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
They'll
No,
sit tight.
that's understandable. And yet the lion's share of the marketplace are people that they just have to move. It's called life. It's called job transfer, job promotion. It's called, hey, guess what? The business is moving to Poughkeepsie. So now we're moving to Poughkeepsie. Where's Poughkeepsie? What's a Poughkeepsie? I don't know.
I think the latest statistic on that is about 46-ish% of the market. Don't quote me. It's somewhere right in there. Are going to do something because of those types of things,
Yeah.
job transfers, life changes.
Yeah, like family's getting bigger, family's getting smaller, this, that, and the other. So that will always exist regardless of the financial impact that it has. But when you talk about the lower levels of inventory, well, that obviously affects how long houses stay on the market too.
Yeah, so take a guess at days on market right now.
Well, it depends. It's probably factored in by price point a little bit.
Yeah.
Average, it's not too awful long. I'll let you. What is the real number?
Of course, I have the number. Seven days.
7. So
7
average is 7 days. So
7 days. So, we don't want to set up any false expectations. I tell folks, if we price it well, inside of 30 days, hopefully. But, we don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about how sharp is the pencil and then what price point are you in. I've seen some houses that have been on the market sell for a few months just because of their price point and the dynamics of maybe the market in that area or timing of, putting certain houses on the market.
Yeah.
So,
and one tool I use to help me determine if we're priced right is the amount of showings we get, right?
Yeah.
If you're way above the atmosphere, you're probably not going to get much showing.
And part of that too, and I'm sure a lot of people, I might be Captain Obvious here, but if you have overpriced your home because you want to get a certain amount of proceeds from the sale of your property, but you've overpriced it, every buyer in the marketplace knows that right now because every buyer starts online.
Right.
And they're looking at your competition. They're looking at your neighbors. They're looking to see how much these houses, what's a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath home in this neighborhood selling for. And guess what? We can find 4 more floor plans that are the same floor plan that have sold in the last few months. They're all selling for this. If you're way above that, then buyers are just ignoring that property, and that can expand that. So even though the numbers are very, very kind of slanted towards the seller right now, it still doesn't mean you can't sharpen your pencil. You've got to sharpen your pencil to be competitive because, again, you want more people looking at your house than ignoring it.
Yeah, I think buyers are very savvy nowadays, and always have been, but even more so now. If you're an active, engaged buyer, you're looking every day, multiple times a day, and you begin to get a sense very quickly of what a good deal is and a not so good deal is.
Right.
And so I think there's this kind of thought that I can just price my house wherever I want to, and it's going to sell, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, if it's based on what you'd ultimately like to get out of the home, that doesn't have a whole lot to do with what the market is going to say. And so that's when you have to have open and honest and real conversations with who you choose to represent you in the transaction. And just, sometimes honesty is the best medicine, and you just need to say, okay, here's where it's going to be, but also be prepared, because if you do price the home correctly and you put it on the market and you start off day one with just all things clicking, right? You're going to have this pent up pool of buyers that's been waiting for a house just like yours. They just don't know your house is available, right? So when you put that house on the market, you should expect to see the greatest number of showings initially out of the gate. That interest is going to be strong because nobody knew your house was available. So if you've overpriced your home or you've missed the mark somehow, you're going to see that taper off, and then eventually you don't have the level of interest in your home anymore, right? And now the problem with that is the only way you can attract a buyer is when a buyer enters the market one at a time. And
That's the hard way.
Yeah, you've kind of burnt through that pent up pool, and now it's like, oh, there's only one keeper in this net. Oh, there's only one keeper in that net. And so you just have to be realistic and say, okay, this is what's going to get the job done. So ultimately, we can get to the next chapter of our life, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And from a realtor perspective, I don't know any brokers who want to either overprice or underprice a property.
Right.
We all want to get it dialed in, not have our clients leave anything on the table, but get it sold in a reasonable amount of time so that everyone's goals can be met, right?
Right.
And the goal usually is, I want to get as much money as I can, but I don't want it to sit on the market for 6 months to do so.
Well, because there's a mortgage payment every month you're sitting there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so after 6 months, how much did that cost you?
Yeah, exactly.
And usually by then you've made price adjustments in the marketplace, and that's more than eating up what your original strategy should have been.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So final stat here, we're talking about showings and making sure that, we're peaking out, right, within our showings. How many showings do you think it takes on average to get a home under contract based on our current statistics?
Well, more than one.
More than one.
It
only takes one, though.
I would say less than 100.
Less than 100.
Yeah, you're right. We only need one offer,
Yeah.
one good offer.
Yeah.
I don't know. What is the real number today?
The real number is number 9.
Number
Like
9.
the Beatles song.
Ah, the Beatles.
Right? 9 showings. So if you get 20 showings and you don't get an offer, what does that indicate?
So that's telling you something. So in this market, in the first 30 days, you should have between 5 to 10 showings. And when you think about that, that means you're averaging, 1 to 2 a week, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty doable, right? So if you don't have between 5 and 10 showings the first 30 days, that's telling you that the buyers are voting with their keyboards. And they're looking elsewhere. They don't see the value there from a pricing standpoint per square foot or bedrooms, bath combinations. They're voting and going elsewhere, right?
Right.
The second side of that coin is if you've had more showings than that and no offers, that means that they've actually taken the time to come look at the place, but they've still chosen to go elsewhere. So either one of those two scenarios are a sign. Here's your sign.
Here's your sign.
We might have missed the pricing on this. We might have, maybe the house isn't dialed in as much as all the other houses in the neighborhood are. But either way, that's an indicator.
Yeah, and so sellers, this is where a good broker who provides great feedback is engaged. It's not a list them and leave them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Engaged in the process of the sale of your property, is giving you feedback on the showings. That's where this comes in as a really important thing.
Right. So now if we switch gears here for a second, let's take a look. If you're a buyer, you're looking at this transaction from a whole different lens, and you're dealing with high interest rates, and so, which is a factor, right?
It's perception. I mean, they're higher than they have been. But have you ever seen 3% rates except for during the pandemic?
No, it was.
So historically, where we're at now is actually pretty decent. I remember at a time when I was happy to get 8% interest or 8.5%.
So when I graduated from high school, my parents gave me a brand new buggy whip.
Yeah, sweet.
Because it was a graduation present. But when I graduated from high school, interest rates were almost 18%.
Yeah.
And I remember my parents telling me, hey, you're not going to buy a house, so just don't plan on that, right? Because we didn't have the perspective back then to say, this too shall pass, and cycles will churn. I think I read somewhere last year that the 40-year average in the United States is 7.75%.
That sounds about right.
That's the 40-year average. And so we've seen markets where it's higher. We've seen markets where it's lower, and we've gotten used to, especially during the pandemic, low threes. I had some clients that were in the upper twos. Those are just incredible rates, right? And so once you've had somebody kind of butter your bread for you, you get mad when you have to do it yourself.
Yeah,
So in
no,
other words,
I understand what you're saying.
We've seen this low rate, now all of a sudden it's like, well, I want to wait for that. I don't know if that's going to ultimately get somebody a house by waiting.
Absolutely. So buyers are looking at what has been historically an average rate in the low sevens. And so the problem is, of course, it's not only the rate, but the prices have just, because of the availability of property that we were just talking about. You combine those two things, lack of availability drives up price, and then rates in the sevens, not the threes, and it just seems like, oh, geez, things change quick.
That's affordability.
The affordability factor
yeah.
is out of whack.
Meanwhile, the competition is heating up.
Heating up still.
It's people are clamoring for houses, and one of the things we forget about in this area is there are plenty of places in the U.S. that people want to move from.
Yeah.
Ask somebody who just went through some of Mother Nature's fury, right?
Right.
How about the Pacific Northwest? Yeah, we have an earthquake every now and then, but other than that, we don't have a lot of critters out here that want to kill you. We don't have the tornadoes and the hurricanes and things like that, and our climate's pretty moderate overall. So we forget that when we live here day in and day out, that this is a pretty appealing place to live compared to other parts of the country. And so people coming in from out of state are always going to be a factor too.
Yeah, you combine that with, previously what we were talking about, there's a certain percentage of people that just have to do stuff, right? You got to buy something, you got to relocate it, or whatever the case may be. So the market's still driving this in, right? And so the competition is heating up again.
And we kind of hope that right now, as we're talking about this, it's late spring, we're kind of moving into summer, and this typically is when inventory starts to pick up, and so
it is trending up.
Yeah, as inventory increases, then that helps relieve some of that pressure. It's anybody's guess what's going to happen with interest rates. I put my crystal ball away a long time ago. I no longer put on the hat and make predictions. And
you don't really want to ride that roller coaster,
No.
If it's just a tough one to try to, just like calling stocks, right? Which I'm not.
Yeah, we're not don't do
so
that.
good
Yeah. So it's led to creativity though on the financing side.
Yeah,
We have lenders that we partner with all the time that offer programs specifically designed to help people with today's current rules.
Yeah, so if you're a buyer, and I just went through this so I can speak to this.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
It was nerve-wracking?
Very nerve-wracking.
Especially when it's your own thing,
I'm
right?
so cavalier about telling people, just try doing a bridge loan, or in this case, it's called a step-up loan, right? But here's what's happening with buyers. Buyers are getting beat out by other cash buyers, right? Mm-hmm. Or people that are ready, willing, and able to purchase a house with, very few contingencies and lots of times cash or whatever the case may be. So if you're somebody that needs to sell your house, like I did, in order to purchase, you might be stuck, because if you really want to get that house and you're contingent, a lot of sellers aren't going to take that offer when there's so many others that won't be contingent.
Sure.
So IN has stepped a bunch of the loan programs, and it's nothing new. It's a different take on the old bridge loan, which is basically they'll loan you the money to buy the new house before you sell the old house.
Right. And there are factors that drive that. Obviously, credit score, equity, things like that will determine whether somebody qualifies for that. But the most important aspect, if I'm working with a buyer, is let's ask those questions. Do we know if those are even possibilities for us, so we know what our options are?
Right.
Because right now, the competition is there, and sellers are kind of in the driver's seat. It's there are numbers that determine people hear all the time whether it's a seller's market or a buyer's market, and nobody really bothers to explain what that means, right? So let's take how many months of on-hand inventory we have.
And what does that mean even now? Months of on-hand inventory.
So in other words, if we have 1 month of on-hand inventory, that means that if we didn't list any single other property, based on our current selling rate, we would run out of houses to sell in 1 month.
Okay.
Okay?
And right now, if I recall, last month the MLS sold 7,000, almost 8,000 properties.
Right.
And that's kind of been an average for.
Yeah,
So-
and it's been hovering under 2 months, like
Yeah.
1 to 2 months, depending on, again, price range, location, all those things matter.
Yeah.
But in the past, the number that's been used is 5 months on average.
Is a balanced market.
Is a balanced market. So if we have 5 months of inventory on hand,
Right.
that doesn't really favor sellers, it doesn't really favor buyers.
That'd be about 40,000 units
roughly,
right now,
which we know
Yeah.
we don't have right now.
which we don't have. We have 16.
So if you have less on-hand inventory than that, then that favors sellers, because that means things are selling and sellers don't have to make as many concessions.
Correct.
If you have more on-hand inventory than that, then it tends to favor buyers because things are sluggish, they're not selling, and that means more buyers, when they do show up, can call the shots.
Do you
right?
remember the days when we had that?
I remember very clearly at one point in 2009, during the Great Recession in South Tacoma, where I was focused on at that time, it was, in 1 month, it was 12 months of on-hand inventory.
Yeah.
So it was seller, list with me today, I'll find you a buyer next year. And that was
Isn't that
just,
crazy to think about?
that was the state of the market. So, yeah, so let's get a little perspective now when we're crying doom and gloom.
Yeah,
Right now,
right.
we're not there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been the number 5. Well, if we're at less than 2, that's what determines whether it's a seller's market or a buyer's market in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And so right now, sellers are kind of in the driver's seat. So if you're a buyer, that means you've got to be ready. If you're playing the game, you've got to play the game to win. You've got to get pre-approved with a good lender, hopefully a local lender. And if the listing agent has worked with this lender, so much the better, because they know that the lender is good, right? But you've got to get your financial ducks in a row, then go figure out which house you want to live in. So, because everybody lives in the payment.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than forgetting which house had which kitchen because you started focusing on, gosh, how much is this going to cost us, right? Get your financial ducks in a row, get all of that stuff finalized, because when you find a house that you want to make an offer on, one of the most important things you can do is have a fully approved letter backing you that tells the seller that you're good for this, right?
Right.
If you don't have that, then that's going to take some time to get. Well, meanwhile, other people are looking at that house also, right? So get that preliminary work done and out of the way, and use the lender as your partner in this transaction along with the broker.
This is a
So-
good point to talk a little bit more in depth about that. As a listing broker, if you're a good listing broker protecting the interests of your client, there are certain things that you look for with not only just the price in terms of the offer. There's 2 other major things.
Well, if I'm a listing broker and I'm getting an offer right here and I see a letter that says that these folks are pre-approved, the first thing I want to do is talk to that lender, because I've done this, maybe it's just me, I've done it so long, I don't believe what I read.
Yeah.
Because we've seen some very clever
Yeah.
lender letters over the years
Yes.
that really have basically said, hey, based on what we talked about on the phone, you're good for this. Well, they haven't done any work. They haven't run credit. They haven't verified pay. They haven't, if they're self-employed, they don't have the taxes.
Pay
they don't-
stubs of the tax returns.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to know how far down the path they've gone with these folks, and how legitimate is this letter that makes it look like they're the greatest people ever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make those phone calls. If the lender makes those phone calls in advance of me making the call to them, so much the better. Because
Right.
that tells me that we have a lender who's local who wants to see this thing make it all the way to the finish line. One of the kiss deaths is and I'm hoping I'm not offending anybody here, but a lot of the national lenders that are, call 1-800-GOT-LOAN kind of thing. Gosh, I hope that's not a real company, by the way.
Yeah. Probably.
Probably, I'm
That's
probably
okay.
in big trouble now. But some of the national, Houdini's House of Home Loans. Now you see us, now you don't.
Yeah.
That's not a great relationship because that file is probably going to transfer hands several times during the transaction. And as a broker, I need to be able to as the buyer's broker, I need to be able to contact that lender at least a dozen times during the transaction. Where are we at on this? It's okay to order the appraisal now. The inspection's good. They're a partner in this transaction. Well, if I'm calling 1-800 whatever, I'm not getting, Billy Bob on the phone every time.
You're lucky you're going to get him at all.
The other aspect of that is Billy Bob knows he's never going to do another deal with me.
Right.
The local lender that I use knows that I'm a trusted resource for them too, because I want to put another client in their hands because I know they're good, right?
Yeah.
And so they're going to be honest with me and say, hey, there's some roadblocks ahead, or hey, this is smooth sailing. I need to know that to do the best job possible for my clients. I don't need to know their credit score. I don't need to know a lot of things. I don't need to know their net worth. I just need to know, did my lender give me the thumbs up? And if so, let's move forward because I trust this lender. That's the most important business relationship if you're a real estate
So
broker.
besides price and terms, then we're looking at the lender, and a local is better.
Right.
Somebody that's working in the market, in the community, that knows what's happening here, and somebody you can call on the phone and get an answer, right?
Right.
The other thing is the other broker, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how still to this day you deal with a lot of real estate brokers that think this is somehow a competition or that this is supposed to be confrontational.
Yeah.
It's really not.
Was more so in the past than it is now.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it's, hey, let's get along. We're going to be married for the next 30 days. Let's play nice and let's try to make sure our clients win. The seller, they've already agreed to the terms and conditions in the paperwork. Let's not get in the way ourselves because, we're a drama person.
Right.
No one's looking for more drama in their life, especially from the real estate broker. So, let's help our clients accomplish what they want to get done. And that at the end of the day makes everybody feel better.
Yeah. So, when I get an offer and I'm representing my sellers, I look not only for the price and terms and advise my clients about those things, but also, hey, what's this loan approval letter look like? Was this lender, could I get them on the phone? Do they make sense? If they're local, we know who they are. That sometimes is better, sometimes not.
Right.
But it helps sometimes. And then the other broker, is the other broker somebody that we can all work with and get the job done? Do they have a track record or history of getting the job done? And if they don't, that's fine too. I just want to know a little bit about who we're dealing with.
Sure.
Yeah.
And know that, is there an open line of communication here?
Yeah.
Does this work for your client? This is what my client is kind of thinking. And no one's ever been upset because we pay too much attention to the details. And that's part of being a good real estate broker, is not assuming anything. Inspect what you expect. Make the phone calls. Make sure that everything's moving smoothly.
Yeah. So I think we kind of it's good to cover that stuff. I don't think all buyers and sellers realize the kind of the behind the scenes stuff, that the things that we're looking for on their behalf, or what's happening really in the marketplace that they need to be aware of. And then we just kind of want to be a voice for that, so people know, hey, here's what's happening on the buyer side. Here's what's happening on the seller side, so that they can kind of make the best decisions possible for themselves and their families.
I think sometimes it's one of the best things people can do is put themselves in the other person's position. If you are coming in as a buyer and you're offering an amazingly low offer, and you want all these fixes done on the house, and you want a brand new fence, and let's replace the roof, and oh, by the way, leave the dog.
We've had that happen
We want the
before.
dog. We want the dog. If you're making all these demands, then it depends on the market you're in.
Yeah.
But also ask yourself, if you were the seller receiving this, how would you feel?
Right.
So many people don't bother to do that, and that's
Yeah.
where you start to get a little bit of perspective and say, yeah, we might be pushing this a little
Yeah.
hard. Maybe they can keep their dog.
Yeah,
you know?
perspective is really everything. And, we're talking a little bit about buyers and affordability. And there's something that I think is worth talking about, and that's not just young people. And I kind of refer to young people because I have, two sons that are in their early 20s, and I have a stepdaughter who's 10. And so I'm looking at, them coming up and thinking about what's happening in the marketplace now with affordability and their general outlook, which is not great, right?
Right.
Most young people or people that aren't in the market think, I'm never going to be able to buy a house.
Yeah, it's a challenge right now. It's a challenge emotionally. It's a challenge intellectually. It's a challenge just to think, gosh, how am I gonna do this thing?
Yeah,
How am I gonna get
absolutely.
this done? So,
And I tend to agree that it's probably in my 30 plus years doing this, probably one of the more difficult times affordability wise to get into the market. But I think there is hope, and I think it's our job, not just as real estate brokers, but everyone's job as parents, friends, people that maybe have been there first, to try to help people understand and have hope that it is possible to get into a home. I think, if we all have this feeling that it's not possible, then I don't think this, the sentiment about home ownership just feels different. We feel, instead of like a citizen,
Yeah.
we feel like a subject.
yeah, and
Right?
it can kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, really what it takes is, you have to have a little nest egg saved up, and you have to make steps to not only figure out what loan programs are available, and are there any programs that are specifically designed to help first-time home buyers, and what those programs look like. That's where a good real estate broker or a good lender come in. People that will take the time to look through all these different programs with you. But so much of today, probably because of social media and all that, but so much today is focused on lifestyle.
Yeah.
Look at me, look at my clothes, look at my car and all that. The people that are serious about getting into a home, there's going to be a little bit of sacrifice. There's going to be, okay, maybe we're not drinking Cristal all weekend long.
Yeah.
We're going to drink Martinelli's instead.
Right.
Maybe we're going to do the things that help build this so that we can make a good move going forward. It's funny, regardless of the sacrifice, I've never met anybody that says, gosh, I wish I hadn't bought that house 10 years ago.
Never, not one
I've never
time.
met one person. Yeah, there's a little bit of sacrifice up front, but it's the payoff is so good, and it's the whole concept of save a little bit here, save a little bit there, and at the end of the day, look how much we have now that we can use, right?
Right. So it's about short-term pain too. So, the wealthiest people in real estate are people that buy and hold. So there's two things I wish that it just wasn't a message of any of our parents had, growing up. It isn't a message now. It just wasn't on the radar, right? But there's two things that I wished that would have been just the seed would have been planted. One is to invest in real estate. Once you get into your mid 20s to late 20s, is to really start thinking about buying your first house. And your first house does not have to be, we're talking about this. So your grandma's final house, or your
Right.
grandpa's,
Right.
was not their first house.
Right. So, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're in their late 20s, and the thing that's funny is they only know their parents' house based on how they grew up in a house. Well, they don't stop to think that this is their parents' fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh home. Nobody knows what the parents' first home looked
The first one
right?
looked like, right.
The first one, it doesn't probably matter what generation you're from. The first home that somebody ever bought was probably not their ideal forever home, right?
Right.
And so, but we don't think about that. And so we watch the lifestyles of the rich and famous, and we
Yeah.
think, gosh, this one doesn't have the infinity pool. I don't think I could
Right.
see myself living here.
Right. I think that's ruined a lot of us.
So you just have to
Yeah.
be realistic, because guess what? The old saying that rent's 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're helping your landlord pay their mortgage.
Right.
So you do what you can to get into a home, and then you're just going to stair step your way through life.
Yeah.
You're gonna have some left turns and some right turns, and you're just gonna keep taking a step, and then next thing you know, you're getting closer to your forever home and things that you really want and stuff, and your life's gonna change over time. So you do what you can to get started, get in the game, because you can't, if you're not in the game, it doesn't matter.
Right. So I just really want to instill that with anybody that doesn't think that there's hope for home ownership, including my kids.
Right.
There is, and it's up to us to try to help as much as we can. I tell my kids, I'm going to help you while I'm alive, not when I'm dead. Don't look for anything. Probably nothing going to be left.
Yeah.
But when I'm alive, I'm going to do everything I can to help you get into a home.
Right.
And it's not going to be. My first house was nothing to write home about.
No, and that's you jump in and you make it work, and you're at the same time you're happy with what you're accomplishing, and and then as time goes, think about it from a seller's perspective, you're building equity.
Yeah.
Even though the market's going to have ebbs and flows, you're building equity. And so down the road, you were talking about some numbers the other day, the average American, what they have in equity right now on their home. Do you remember what that-
Did I not go through that?
No, I think
I missed
it was
that.
like 299
Yeah, here it is.
something
The average homeowner, according to CBS Money Watch and a whole bunch of other sources, is $299,000.
in equity. That's the average.
The average, right? Americans are sitting on $30 trillion in home equity, is all-time high, because of a lot of factors. And here's the one thing.
Go ahead. No, you were
Really
going to say
shocks me.
how many people out there have no mortgage on their house?
Because remember, back in the day, people would have a party. Once they paid their mortgage, they'd burn their...
Right.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
40% of
40%.
homeowners have free and clear mortgages.
Isn't that?
I can't even believe that number.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe. So we have that disparity, right? We have all this wealth from home ownership, and then we have young people going, hey, how do I get in? It doesn't seem possible. So it's up to us to really try to, get this moving, right?
Yeah, and it didn't start that way. I mean, it took those small incremental steps, to get there. So,
Yeah, I mean, you used to also be able to survive on one income and buy a home and a car and groceries and get the kids in school and have clothes and things have changed and we can't control that.
Right.
But we can do what we can do, right?
Yep.
The other thing I wish that was instilled in me, and this is no way, I'm not a stock guy, but you go buy your first house and then work your way into your next house, right? That has to be going. And then I tell my kids, get a Roth account, or if your work has a retirement account, and just put the minimum amount.
Put some investments
And-
and some money aside for.
Here's the number I share with my kids all the time, and I know they're going to do it because they've already opened their accounts. So the Roth IRA calculators are online. You can just pull them up anywhere you want. Guess how much you have? So $7,000 a year is the contribution now.
Okay.
The maximum contribution. And don't get me if I'm off a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm taking off my financial advisor hat right now.
I am not a financial advisor, but these are things
That's a
that
good ballpark number.
we need to have conversations about for our kids and ourselves.
Yep.
It's never too late to start
Right.
something, right? So if you take $583 a month out of your paycheck, which is a good chunk of money, and you can start out lower than that, but if you started that at the age of 25, by the time you're 65, at a rate of return of 8%, which is not super aggressive, not super low. So kind of maybe a medium aggressive rate of return.
Okay.
How much money do you think you'd have by the time you're 65?
So
$583
$583 a month. You just keep putting it in every month. And
You're averaging an 8% return over this
Okay.
whole time.
sometimes they'll be
Sometimes
lower,
higher,
sometimes they'll
sometimes
jump
lower.
higher. And for how long?
Till you're 65, so 40 years.
Till you're 65. Well, 65, you're still a young sprout. At
You
65.
just, yeah.
So, okay, how much would you have?
You would have $2.3 million. $2.3 million for $583 a month.
I know people whose bar tabs are more than that.
Right?
So
Right.
really what you're talking about is just eliminating the leaks out of your financial bucket.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you don't go out and party as hard on Friday and Saturday nights and you put some money aside.
Right.
Maybe you get this kind of car instead of that kind of car. Maybe
Yeah.
you stop worrying about what your friends are driving
Yeah.
or the clothes I mean, there's so many ways we spend money that we don't even think about it, right?
Right. All our subscriptions on our phone
Yeah.
and stuff. I think if you did a little kind of personal financial audit and kind of eliminated some of that and started diverting a little bit over here,
Yeah.
that in combination with buying a house, getting on the property ladder, I wish I would have known that.
I think if people were just more aware of how they spend their money, they would be shocked at what they spend. I remember the first time I got my PayPal statement because I used to have my coffee shop account set up
Yeah.
to just directly bill PayPal, right? And the first time I got that statement, I said, I'm spending over $200 a month in coffee.
Right.
Just and those are not expensive cups of coffee. I'm a straight black
You're
coffee
a black
guy, right?
coffee guy, right?
And
that's a
there's
lot of
$200
coffee
in
now.
coffee from this one establishment. So Grandma and Grandpa used to talk about balancing the checkbook every month.
Right.
Finding out, balancing it to the penny, and how
Yeah.
much did we spend? I haven't balanced a check.
haven't
We don't
either.
do that anymore.
No,
we
we
look at
don't.
our account. Yeah, we're
We
good.
don't, yeah.
But that awareness is critical to saying, maybe I'll make a cup of coffee and take it in my big Stanley cup
Yeah.
as I leave the house today instead of spending $5-6 at the coffee shop. So
Yeah.
it's little stuff like that.
It's little stuff like that, and I think if we can all do our part to try to get the young folks moving in that direction and thinking that it's possible, because it is.
Yeah.
We all need to have hope, right? That we can work hard and we can have our dream. Right?
Yeah, and who knows? You buy your first house, you may find you love it. You may find you love
Yeah,
working
right,
on
right,
stuff,
right.
and then next thing you know, you're thinking, "Gosh, how can I buy a second house?
Yeah.
How can I? What do we need to do? Can we pay this off? Can we maybe buy a third house? Can we develop a financial resource that helps build towards our future wealth as well? Because that's certainly a viable path for
And
a lot of people.
It's funny how that works, and you mentioned that. First of all, you don't need to have 50 of you watching and listening to the podcast or watching these guys. I got 50 doors in 5 years. You don't need that. You
Yeah,
need 3 or 4 properties.
Right.
If you really want to kind of develop another income stream through rental.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, just a little shout out to small landlords that are feeling the pain of. I'm an advocate. Small landlords represent the most affordable housing that we have in the United States.
You mean it's not the
Statistically.
big conglomerates that
right.
have the big 500 unit?
No,
Fronts?
yeah,
Okay.
correct. You are correct, sir.
Yeah.
And those guys are gobbling up everything.
Right.
And I think, which is, I'm not an advocate for.
Yeah.
Small landlords represent a good portion of affordable housing, and they're kind of getting beat up here with these new laws that I think are trying to do something for affordable housing, but probably miss the mark sometimes and go a little too far with our landlords. And we don't want to scare those folks off, get them out of the market only to have it gobbled up by the mega landlords of the world.
So are you suggesting that people that are passing policies are out of touch with reality of the marketplace a little bit?
I'm not worried
Sometimes.
about being politically correct. I think
Took my political hat off.
I
just
think
then,
the
too,
squeaky
so.
wheel gets the grease,
Yeah.
right? And right now, that's the squeaky wheel. And I'm not coming at this. I have children who are grown-ups now
Mm-hmm.
that need affordable housing. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
But
No, that's,
sometimes you can't use a 10-pound hammer to fix something that really needs some finesse, right?
right.
A lot of that's going on right now, and hopefully that swings back the other way a little bit.
So in retrospect, as we wrap up this first one, when you look at the future, is future dim or is the future bright as far as you see it?
Future's always bright. I'm an optimist, right? I think at the end of the day, the market will work its way through and will find ways to get people into properties. We do have an inventory problem. I think some of these new ADU laws, the density laws, will help, and I'm really happy to see that. You're going to start seeing more. I've started seeing a little bit in King County and some down south, and especially in Oregon, actually, where you're seeing 4 or 5 houses on one average residential lot. And it's sort of like a little community. They each have different tax parcel numbers that can be bought and sold independently of each other. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, there are going to be people that kind of take advantage of that situation and just kind of schlock it all up. But there's going to be other people that get creative with that and say, you know what? We could turn this into not just boxes on dirt, but we could turn this into more of a community,
Yeah.
more of a lifestyle, more of a cooperative type of neighborhood and stuff too. And so it's exciting. You know, it's change, and a lot of people just fight it because it's change. But I always think about the old saying that the price of progress is the pain of change.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
pain of change is forgotten when the benefits of the change are fully realized. And
Yeah.
and it's so true. And you only really know that when you look back in time. But just I'm with you. I think the future's bright. It is what we will make it.
Yeah.
And part of that starts here, and just saying, you know what,
Absolutely.
we can get this too shall pass. Yeah, we can get through this. It's going to be another chapter in the book. And you know, we think about some of the challenges we've had in our past, and now we tend to laugh at them over a drink with our friends. You know,
Right.
well, let me tell you about the time I stubbed my toe.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And I
so-
can't think of a better way to end this than on that high note. And I absolutely agree with you. The future is going to be bright, and change is sometimes hard, but it's going to be what we make it.
Yep, yep. I think just being real and looking for the best outcomes is what our clients are looking for.
Yeah.
It's what you're looking for as a seller. It's what you're looking for as a buyer. Everybody's kind of in the same boat,
Yeah.
even though we're looking at the puzzle from a different piece. But that's really what it's all about. And so just keep moving forward, and we'll make it what we can make it.
Absolutely. All right, Al. We'll see you next month.
Let's do this again. This is
We
fun.
will do it again.
Yeah, let's do
right.
it.
Have a good day.